Thank you for joining us for the first episode of Bass Crew. I am your host, Mike Winkler, and joining me is Kmiecik. Hey, thanks for joining Casey and I. It's December 26, 2017, northern Wisconsin. What did two bass fishermen do when it's December 26 in northern Wisconsin when it is negative 8 degrees out? We sit and we make a podcast because we have nothing better to do with our time.
Yeah, there's been a lot of podcasts started tonight, I bet. They'll all be on iTunes tomorrow.
So keep an eye on iTunes tomorrow for all the guys who are bass fishermen. Like I said, negative 8 degrees out today. We were talking earlier, and it sounds like on one of the local lakes, a vehicle through. Casey?
Yeah, looks like on Chute Pond somebody drove through where there was about 2 inches of ice, from what I heard. That people think just because it's 10 below that the ice automatically gets to 12 inches thick, and not the case.
So for you ice fishermen, be safe out there. Don't be driving on thin ice. So Casey, you fished locally, regionally, and even nationally. You fished some local club tournaments, some jackpots. You fished your first BFL last year, your first Coastal last year. What are some of your favorite techniques? And if you were to have one rod in the boat, what would it be?
My favorite techniques revolve around shallow water grass fishing, mostly braided line. My favorite technique is definitely punching. Frogging also. Those are kind of my favorite tactics for big fish. Punching seems to be the best method that I know for catching the biggest fish in the lake in the thickest cover, the thickest weeds. So I really like punching.
So when you're punching in a thick cover, what types of things are you looking for in the weeds that get you to where you're at?
I like to look for any matted vegetation. Obviously, sometimes there's giant fields of matted vegetation, but if you can find small isolated mats, those can be really, really good. If you're looking at a big football field size mat, you're going to look for little irregularities, spots that are thicker than others, spots that are thinner than others, points and depressions, anywhere where you know that the water is deeper or shallower than other spots are always good.
Talk to me about your gear. What kind of gear do you use when you're punching?
I like to use a 8-foot extra heavy punching rod, 50 to 65 pound braid. Typically 50 pound, it does the job. If I was going down to, say, Florida or something like that where you could run into bigger fish, I'd probably step it up to 65. And then as far as weights go, I like to start out with a 1 ounce weight, and depending on the thickness of the mat, I'll go up to 1 1/4 or 1.5 ounces. I try to use the lightest weight that I can get away with. I think you get more bites that way and a better hook set, or a better hookup ratio, because the weight is smaller and there's more room for the hook point to penetrate the fish's mouth.
So you talk about hooks. What kind of hooks are you using? Are you using an extra wide gap? Are you using a flipping hook? What kind of hook do you like?
I like to use a straight shank, heavy duty hook with a snell knot. I think that gets the best hook sets without risk of bending the hook out on a fish.
Yeah, and if you use that, if you know what that snell knot is, the snell knot's a good knot to be using on that, because then you're not getting a line. Your weight isn't going to hook on the line like you would on a regular knot where it's tied to the top of the...
Right, the weight isn't going to bounce and hit the knot and possibly chip away at the knot or break the knot.
All right, so you're using 50-pound braid. You're using an 8-foot extra heavy-duty flipping stick, 50 to 65-pound braid, ounce to 1.5 ounce flipping weights, tungstens. What type of baits do you like to use during this type of presentation, and what decides what bait, what color you're using?
I like to keep it simple. I have a couple different creature baits that I use. Anything that looks like a craw is fine. If the bite is good, I like to have a more aggressive action of claw flapping. But if it's a tougher bite, I like to go to a more finesse technique where the whatever bait I use doesn't have a lot of action. And as far as colors, I only buy 2 colors, green pumpkin and black and blue. Black and blue for cloudy days and green pumpkin for sunny days. Also, if the water was really dirty, I would probably just stick with the black and blue and not try to change it up.
Yeah, so there's really only 2 colors you need to buy, green pumpkin and black and blue. What about dyeing the ends of your baits? You do anything like that?
I will occasionally. If I look down and see some of the bluegills have chartreuse tail in the lake that I'm fishing, I'll try. I don't know if it'll get me extra bites or not, but sometimes it's a little bit of a confidence thing. If I get a bite on it when I do it, I'll just keep doing it for the rest of the day. All right, Mike, you won Angler of the Year in Tri-County Bassmasters Club this year and fished a lot of BFLs and other local open tournaments. What techniques and baits did you use most this year?
Well, you said I finished as Angler of the Year for our local Tri-County Bassmasters, and I'll just state that I did that without a single win for the entire year. I had quite a few second places. I started the year with a 0 down on Winneconne, which that body of water has been either really good to me or it's been really bad for me. After that, I pulled my act together. I fished at BFLs this year. It was my first year as a boater. I did qualify for the regional championships down on the Barren River. I did not go. My wife and I are in the middle of a remodel, so I didn't go. I had a good buddy go down there, and he learned what the name Barren River really means because it was pretty barren for him. For me, most of the things I like to do, my favorite style of fishing is actually flipping and pitching. I love standing timber. I love brush. I like to a lot of the times I'm using a 7-foot or 6'6" medium heavy. I do a lot of my flipping with 20-pound Seagar and Vizex fluorocarbon, especially if I'm in and around wood. I don't like the braid. To me, I think braid cuts into the wood a little bit more. I will flip it with that. I'll flip anything from a 1/16 to an 1/8 ounce tungsten, depending on the rate of fall, all the way up to about a 1/2 ounce, depending on how deep the water is, how stained, and how thick the cover is. To me, the most fun thing in fishing is pulling a fish right out of that wood, right out of the timber.
So when you're flipping with that tungsten weight, in the wood, do you peg your sinker or do you leave it free fall?
I do both. If I'm flipping a 1/16 or an 1/8 ounce, I will peg it. If I'm flipping the 1/4 ounce or heavier, usually I don't peg it. There's something about being able to flip in there and that sinker and that style bait separating, and I think you get a little bit more bites in a heavy cover when you don't have it pegged.
So you said that you use a 6.5 to 7 foot rod. A lot of guys like a lot longer rods for flipping. Why do you choose the shorter rod?
I like to get my boat in a little closer, and that 6'6". If I'm working real close at 6'6", I'm not hitting the side of the boat with it like I will with a 7-foot or an 8-foot rod. Most of my flips are within 20 feet of where I'm at, so I'm not having to reach out there. I try and get in there quiet with my boat. I've been known, in especially a couple of the BFLs, I'll take my boat 15-20 feet inside of a downed tree to get up to the base versus trying to flip it from the outside. I think you have a lot better hookup ratio and landing the fish when you're closer to them, but you also have to be pretty quiet. So that's why I'll use a 6'6" or a 7-foot versus that 8-foot flipping stick.
And that kind of leads me into my next question. A lot of pros are kind of split on this, whether or not when you come up to a large tree or a group of trees, whether to flip to the outside of the trees first and work your way in, or flip to the heart of the cover right away and try to get the biggest fish out of there on the first flip.
For me, usually what I'll do is I'll work the outside of the tree with a couple different baits, whether it's a jig or a spinner bait, something like that. I'll work the outside, and then I start from the outside and work my way in. I have found that most of the time, those bigger fish are usually underneath a horizontal log or branch in the water, and they'll sit right up underneath it. And if you look in the summer, you'll see bluegills up underneath there too. So again, I think that's a lot of time what they're feeding on is the bluegills or shad or something like that are right up underneath those limbs, and they'll sit right in line with those limbs. So I usually work from the outside in. So Casey, 2018 season, what are you looking at for doing next year that's either new or a different challenge, a new technique? What are you looking at doing next year?
Well, for next year, I think I'm going to try to improve my finesse fishing. The last few years, I've been pretty much strictly a power fisherman, and I still think that catches the largest fish in most tournaments. It doesn't always catch the numbers. So I think I'm going to try to work on finesse tactics such as Senko fishing and drop shotting, just to get my catch more fish, whether it be for fun or in tournaments, and for those tough bites where you might catch one or two big ones doing what you like doing, which for me is power fishing. Sometimes you're only going to get one or two of those big 4 or 5 pounders, and you have to go scrap together a limit for the rest of your fish, and that's where finesse fishing comes into play for me.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, so I got a 21-foot boat and probably got 20 rods in there. I've got one spinning rod in my boat. That's all I ever have. I don't finesse fish. If I'm finesse fishing, I told you earlier, I will flip and pitch with a 16th ounce tungsten. I do that all on casting gear. A lot of guys will do that with spinning gear. I know for me, one of the things I'm going to be doing a lot more this year, or working on this year, is shaky head. I'm not good at finesse fishing. I agree with you. I'm usually fishing for those bigger fish, those more aggressive fish. But there are times when you got 1 or 2 fish in a live well, you need to finish out that limit. And there are a lot of guys, especially in the elites and in the FLW Tour, that they live and die by a shaky head or a tube or a Senko. I hate throwing them, so I need to start working on that. So for you, if you're going to be throwing a finesse, in your opinion, what's a good rod? What's a good combo for doing that?
I like a 7-foot medium or medium light spinning rod. Depending on if I'm fishing grass or something like that, I like a medium just to be able to yank them out of there. Medium light for drop shotting, usually, just for that extra feel. I also like to run braid as a main line on all my spinning rods, and then a fluorocarbon leader. It just gives you way better feel, better hook sets, and less line twist.
This week's tackle tip. In the last few years, a very popular bait in the tournament front has been the rivers to seas whopper plopper, especially down in like the Tennessee River area. One of the challenges of using the whopper plopper is when you are around grass, that grass tends to wrap around the main body of the whopper plopper. When it does that, the main body of the whopper plopper starts to spin versus the rear end of the whopper plopper. Then what happens is, as that's spinning on your retrieve back to the boat, it twists your line up, causing your line to be unmanageable. Sometimes you even have to replace that line just because of that. So tackle tip for today is, on the front end of the line tie for that whopper plopper, put on a snap ring. And then to that snap ring, put a high quality barrel swivel, such as a Spro barrel swivel. When you do that, what will happen is, when that body of that whopper plopper starts to spin versus twisting your line up, all that spin is taken out by that barrel swivel. Again, snap ring with a barrel swivel. That should help keep your line manageable. Okay, Casey, getting ready to wrap up for the day. Talk to me a little bit about what your goals, what you're looking forward to for 2018.
Well, for 2018, I plan on fishing the BFL Great Lakes Division schedule.
You're going to be going as a boater or as a co-angler, Casey?
Going as a boater. I don't have a lot of experience on the Mississippi River where all of the tournaments are held this year, but I think it suits my style of fishing well, and I guess my goal would be to do well enough to finish in the top, I think it's the top 50 in points, and qualify for the regionals. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the Great Lakes BFLs myself. Already started doing a little bit of scouting for the regional. I'm not trying to cart before the horse here, but this year they're heading down to Lake of the Ozarks down in Missouri. They've been fishing the Tennessee